Last year I purchased a couple of well-used industrial lift stands at a machine shop auction and then restored them. Today we're going to take one of these stands and turn it into a mobile workbench. I'm Paul and this is Adventures in Fabrication. If it's your first time here, be sure and hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you don't miss out on future videos. My plan is to use leftover materials to keep costs down. For the bench, I had a scrap piece of 3/4 inch plywood that was close to the 24 by 32 size I needed. I used a circular saw to cut it to size. Table saw would have been preferable, but unfortunately I don't own one. Plywood does have a tendency to splinter on the edges, and this would be a long-term problem, so the edges needed to be rounded over. The easiest way to do that is with a router and a 1/4 inch roundover bit. I have a little trim router and that's perfect for the job, so I rounded over both the top and bottom edges. Because this is a workbench, it's going to get beaten up, so spending a lot of time on prep work and filling the grain didn't make a whole lot of sense. So when it came to sanding, I only took the sanding to 220 grit. Sanding is pretty boring stuff, so let's fast forward in time here. At this point it occurred to me, this was a good test project to try spraying stain and poly. At the time I had never done it before, so I found some leftover Gentle Finishes pecan water-based stain, and they advertised it as being sprayable, so I decided to give it a try. The plan was to slowly build the color, so I wouldn't have to wipe it off and would be like spraying paint. So I pulled out my refurbished SRI Pro and began spraying. The first and second coats went down with no issue. However, on the third coat, I put it down a little too heavy and needed to wipe it off. The stain was really thin and I probably should have moved to a 1mm tip. I would have gotten much better atomization and control. Now the pecan color isn't my favorite, but I wasn't going to go and spend a lot of money on a workbench top. In the end, the staining turned out great, but I clearly have a lot to learn about spraying wood stain. Next up was spraying the poly. Again, I went to the paint cabinet and grabbed some leftover Gentle Finishes water-based semi-gloss. This stuff was really thick, but I thought the refurbished with the 1.2mm tip could handle it. As you can see, about halfway through the first coat, I stopped and tried to adjust the gun a couple of times, but I just couldn't get it to spray as well as I would have liked. So I decided that my only option at this point was to build the finish. So I ended up putting down 5 coats. In the end, the finish turned out pretty good. However, the lack of serious prep work and spray gun issues did show. Of course, this may be the perfect excuse to buy another spray gun. How to attach it to the stand was a dilemma. I'm pretty sure sometime in the future I'll want to use the stand for something else. So drilling a bunch of holes in the top and turning it into Swiss cheese just wasn't going to happen. So the logical solution was to use a clamping mechanism. To avoid shifting laterally, I screwed 4 pieces of scrap 1x2 to the bottom. Then I made 4 clamps out of scrap 1x2 and leftover 18 gauge construction ties. To keep the tension between the table and the tie, I added small pieces of rubber padding, which compressed when the clamps were attached. To hold the padding in place, I glued it to the tie with contact cement. They may not be the prettiest clamps, but they work great and were essentially free. I had a small vise lying around just collecting dust, and this seemed like the perfect project to use it on. To install it, all I had to do was mark and then drill 3 5/16 inch holes in the bench. I'm only showing one being drilled here. Then I just bolted the base down to the table and reattached the upper portion of the vise. I expect the vise to be a handy addition to the bench. However, this vise and the table are really not designed for serious beating or torquing on, just light duty work. When I look at the end result, I'm really pleased. Putting automotive finish on a beaten up old lift stand is like putting lipstick on a pig, and finishing off the top of a workbench is probably pointless. But it was fun, and spraying the stain and poly was a good learning experience. that will really help me out on the next project. Also, I've always liked having good looking tools. For me, it makes working in the shop all that more enjoyable. Now before you go, be sure and hit that subscribe button and the notification button so you don't miss out on future videos. Thanks for watching.